Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa. Wa salamun ala ibadihi alladhina istafa. Amma ba'd. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa kunu ma'as sadiqin. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursalin. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa barik wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa barik wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa barik wa sallim. Alhamdulillah, we've been talking about dhikr, specifically silent dhikr, muraqabah, wuquf, and attaining this constant presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ma'iyya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or ihsan, this idea that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us. And this idea and this state was something that the Sahaba gained from the company of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the source of everything in this deen, whether it be the Quran, whether it be the Hadith, whether it be the Sunnah, and whether it be the spiritual states which are to be experienced in this deen. All of it was essentially emanates from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was so much, there was so much information, there was so much spiritual states, there was so much there that it required 124,000 Sahaba, roughly, to take all of this from the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ was given this unique ability to encompass all of that knowledge in all of those spiritual states. However, the Sahaba obviously were, not prophets, and therefore they required a lot more of them to take all of this and keep it within the ummah thereafter, and then transfer it heart to heart until it reached people like you and me. So the Sahaba, if you look at them, even though they were the muhaddithun, right? If anyone deserved to be called a muhaddith, right, it was the Sahaba. They were the ones that transmitted all the hadith to us. They were the mufassirun. The Prophet ﷺ taught them the tafsir of the Quran, and they therefore did tafsir of the Quran like Ibn Abbas, etc., until that tafsir reached us till today. They were the mujahidun. They were the people that fought alongside the Prophet ﷺ in the battles such as Badr and Uhud and Ahzab, etc. They were also the fuqaha. They were the people that were taught jurisprudence or fiqh by the Prophet ﷺ, such as Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and all these other different companions that were knowledgeable in fiqh. But we don't call the Sahaba the muhaddithun. We don't call them the mufassirun. We don't call them the mujahidun. We don't call them fuqaha. We call them Sahaba. We call them Sahaba because this was their defining characteristic. A Sahabi is a person that has gained the companionship of someone. And in this case, they are the Sahabatul Rasul. They are the Ashabul Rasul. They are the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. In other words, their defining characteristic was the fact that they had the company of the Prophet ﷺ in a state of Iman. Why do we add this clause of in a state of Iman? Because there were some people that, for example, didn't benefit from the Prophet ﷺ because they were not Muslims, like, for example, Abu Lahab or Abu Jahl, right? They had the company of the Prophet ﷺ, but they didn't have Iman. And therefore that state, all those states, those spiritual states did not transfer to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions regarding the Sahaba, فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا, that if you were to believe as they have believed, meaning the Sahaba have believed, then if they were to believe as the Sahaba believed, they would be rightly guided. In other words, they are the mi'yar, they are this golden standard of Iman, the Sahaba, right? They are the golden standard of Iman. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also gave them this stamp of approval, radiyallahu anhum wa radu an, that Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Him. So what else could you ask for? Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself is saying that he is pleased with the Sahaba and that the Sahaba are pleased with him. There could be nothing better than that. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that the best of my followers, khairu ummati, the best of my ummah, qadni, is my generation, meaning my contemporaries, meaning the Sahaba. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, and then those that will come after them, meaning the Tabi'un. And then ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, and then those that will follow later. Okay, follow the Tabi'un, meaning the Taba Tabi'een. So the best three generations are defined by the company that they kept. It's not by any other standard. It's not by their deeds. It's not by, even though of course they had the best deeds, right? It's not by any other characteristics. It's not by the amount of knowledge that they gained. It's not by the amount of amal that they did. It's by whose company they kept. The Sahaba were defined by the company of the Prophet ﷺ. The Tabi'un were defined by the company of the Sahaba. And the Taba Tabi'un were defined by their company of the Tabi'un in turn. So this is how these states and this state and learning of the deen has been transferred to us till this day. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa kunu ma'as sadiqeen. O you who believe, have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is what we've been discussing previously with our dhikr, right? To have ihsan, to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ, and be with those who are truthful in terms of their words and their actions. So we are commanded towards good company in the Quran, right? We are commanded to have taqwa and also be in the company of those who are truthful. In other words, to have good company around us. The Prophet ﷺ also told us the parable of good company and bad company, right? He said, verily the parable of good company and a bad company is only that of a seller of musk. If you've ever experienced musk, like real musk, right? You know what it smells like, and you know how strong that smell is and how beautiful that smell is. And that of a blacksmith. Unfortunately, we don't live in a time when we get to see blacksmiths on a regular basis, but a blacksmith is a person that makes things out of iron and metal. You know, he usually has a fire, right? A furnace, and then he heats things up, pieces of metal, and then he hits them with a hammer to, make it into a sword or whatever he wants to make it into. The seller of musk will give you some perfume. Like if you go visit him, he'll give you some musk that he has on him. You will buy some, or he'll either gift you some, right? Or you'll buy some from him, or you will at least experience a good smell while you're around him. The least thing that you will get is that you'll get to experience some good fragrances while you're around him. As for the blacksmith, he's got a fire that's bellowing this black smoke, right? He will burn your clothes, right? Either it's some part of the fire or some little ember will come fall on your clothes and will burn your clothes, or at least you'll experience the smoke and the bad smell of burning wood around him. So that's good company and bad company, right? Good company, either you'll gain some material benefit from them, or you will at least enjoy the pleasantness of their company by being around them. And if there's a bad company, they will either burn your clothes, you'll either suffer some kind of harm when you're around them, or at least you'll have a bad experience just by being around them. You'll notice this, when you visit certain people, some of them are, quote unquote downers, right? Or uppers. When you're around them, they make you feel down. They make you feel bad afterwards. They make you feel depressed. They make you feel anxious. And some people, when you're in their company, you feel relaxed. You feel positive. You feel good afterwards, right? So the Prophet ﷺ was asked, which of our companions are best? This is narrated by Muhasibi. He replied, one whose appearance reminds you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whose speech increases you in knowledge, and whose actions remind you of the hereafter. This is a good companion. When you see him, you remember Allah. He is a godly man. He is a man of Allah. And whose speech increases you. Now, when he talks, he gives you nuggets of knowledge. You increase in your knowledge when you're around him or her. And when you look at their actions, you're reminded of the akhirah, because they are working for their akhirah. They're not concerned about the dunya so much. So therefore, you benefit in these three ways. One, you're reminded of Allah. Number two, your knowledge increases. And number three, inshallah, your actions increase as well because you're reminded of the akhirah by seeing how they act. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that a man follows the deen of his friend. الرجل على دين خليلي. Okay, if you want to find out about a person, just ask who his friends are and look at his friends, and you will know what kind of a person he is or she is. الرجل على دين خليلي. A person is on the deen of his friend. So one should consider who he makes his friend. Right? فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِلُ. So be wary, be very careful, watch who you befriend. Now, the question comes as to why? Why, right? Now, every time, this is a spiritual sort of principle, right, of suhbah, of company. Every time two people meet, there is a transfer that occurs between the hearts. Every time two people meet, their hearts transfer affect to each other and receive affect from each other. So if you meet a very evil person, that evil will transfer to your heart. It will affect your heart. And whatever you have in your heart, it will also affect that other person. And this transfer occurs regardless of whether you intend that transfer to occur or not. Okay, someone says like, okay, no, I'm not going to get influenced by that person. I'm just going to meet them anyway. No, you will be influenced by them, no matter how much you don't wish it to happen, right? This is something that is a natural trait of the heart. Hearts transfer this sort of energy and this sort of enthusiasm, right? You go and you talk to someone, for example, they're very excited about basketball. After sitting with them for an hour or two, you'll come away, you'll be excited about basketball. You want to watch the latest game, right? You'll know some of the stats of the players. You go to someone who's excited about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, you will come away excited about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the deen. You want to make someone a smoker, na'udhu billah, you put them in the company of a few smokers, and a few months later, they'll be smoking. It's easy. This is the principle of company. So we should be very careful about protecting our hearts, and not only protecting them, but we should be trying to put our hearts into the company of people that will affect them in a good way. Right? And this is essentially how the deen is learned. Inshallah, we're out of time. Inshallah, we're going to continue next time onto these sort of spiritual topics. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to protect our hearts from evil influences. May He allow us to have good company at all times in our life. May He save us and our children and our family from bad company. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Jazakallahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.